Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rose Report. Tonight, I'm joined by the president of Accuracy in Media, Adam Gullette. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So, I wanted to have you on because we've seen a lot of efforts by school systems and really just a lot of people who have nefarious purposes trying to hide the truth from parents and also trying to hide the truth from the American voters about what they're really doing behind closed doors. So, just to start off, what does Accuracy in Media do on a daily basis?
Sure, we do a combination of investigative journalism and cultural activism to hold bad public policy actors accountable.
Right. And what does that look like for your investigators? Are you recording people? Are there efforts to expose school boards? What does that look like?
Well, most recently, as you're alluding to, we've investigated over 150 school districts across the country, largely in red districts, in red communities, in red states, to see exactly what's happening in public education. And we weren't exactly thrilled with what we found.
And that's really interesting that you went to red districts and red areas. Why did you go there rather than the blue areas where we actually thought there were these actions going on by school boards?
Well, for journalism, they say if a man, or I'm sorry, if a dog bit a man, it wouldn't be a story. If a man bites a dog, it would be a story. If we went to Berkeley, California, or Boulder, Colorado, you would expect radical left wing ideas to be pushed in schools. But when we went to Manchester, Tennessee, a 3-to-1 Republican to Democrat community, and an administrator bragged to us about how progressive their curriculum was from an equity point of view, that's a far more interesting story. In addition, I think those far left areas are hopeless, whereas at least in the areas where we investigate, there's a chance to solve the problem.
And in those red areas, were people being very sneaky about it, or was it kind of an open secret the way it has been in left wing areas?
What we found again and again and again is that these administrators, these equity officers, are devoted to advancing the principles associated with critical race theory. They're devoted to teaching social justice, to teaching that capitalism is inherently racist, that America is systemically racist. And we even found that they'll do this in states where it's illegal to do so. We investigated Iowa, Tennessee, Idaho, and now Texas, states where it's illegal to teach these things. And the administrators were more than happy to find ways around the law. It's outrageous.
And from what you've seen, are there outside left wing groups helping them do that, helping them develop new language, or is it really very insular?
It's hard to say exactly. Normally, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe that anybody's getting their marching orders from one central organization. George Soros isn't telling them what to say.
Right.
But we did find consistently that these folks speak in the same language. We found multiple people who told us, well, we've stopped calling it privilege and instead we call it circumstance. Or we might change the name of our department from diversity, equity, and inclusion to belonging. In addition, we found district after district after district that told us about a classroom news service called Newsella. So we inquired about it. And what we found is that in states like Texas, where it's illegal to teach the 1619 Project, instead, districts sign up for Newsella. Newsella is a direct partner of the Southern Poverty Law Center. They're a direct partner of radical revisionist historian Howard Zinn, and they're a direct partner of the 1619 Project. So if your kid came home from school and he was reading the 1619 Project, you would say, what gives? But when they come home from school and they're reading the exact same content, but it has a masthead that says Newsella, you're none the wiser.
And has this picked up steam in the last couple of years? Because we know CRT became a big focal point, I would say, in the last 3 or 4 years. But this action by school officials, has this progressed recently?
Yeah, I would say it really has. In the wake of George Floyd, many school districts hired equity officers. And it's already outrageous how much money in public education gets spent on administration rather than going to the classroom. But these equity officers really take the cake. These are non-classroom, full-time positions in pretty much every school district you could find in America, focused exclusively on advancing the principles associated with critical race theory. Some small school districts, like the Fort Worth School District, and there's like nearly 40 school districts in Fort Worth, Texas, but the Fort Worth School District alone, one of nearly 40, has about a half dozen people in their equity department. They're spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, not to teach underpaid, high-performing teachers, or not to pay them, but to pay equity officers.
And equity officers, are they engaging with the parents at all? Because parents are often completely blind to what's happening. So when parents see these recordings, do they know these equity officers, or is it very much behind the curtain?
It's very much behind the curtain where most parents don't even know their district has hired equity officers. And many times, if they find out about the equity officer and reach out to them, these equity officers are deceptive to them. And I think that public education is like Congress. Congress as a whole, the popularity rating is slightly below COVID. Nobody likes Congress, but everybody likes their congressman. 95%, 98% get reelected because people want to believe that their congressman is the good one. Same thing with public education. Everyone realizes there are major problems with public education, but they've met their kid's teacher, they've met their kid's principal. They want to assume that they're the good ones. Well, we meet these people, we do it with a hidden camera. And what we found is that they're lying to parents.
And do you think that there is room to fix this? Because a lot of parents have wondered, what is the big action we need to take? What is the federal action that needs to be taken to really get all of this out of classrooms and preserve it? Being that you see the on the ground recording and reporting, do you see any big action that can be done to really squash this?
Honestly, I think to a large degree, public education as we know it is irredeemable. If you ban the teachings associated with critical race theory, they call it something else. If you bring you ban the 1619 project, they bring in Newsella. You know, we even found in Ohio, we were told about one school district where the state banned them from not having separate men's and women's bathrooms in schools. And instead, the district made one bathroom for boys and girls, but had separate doors to access that same bathroom so that they can comply with the state law. This is the kind of stuff that parents are up against. And the administrators are paid to do this. They're going to stay one step ahead of the parents every step of the way. The only solution is school choice. The only solution is to allow the money to follow the child with a backpack type bill. Because one, that'll get parents the heck out of there if they want to. And two, that'll force these terrible schools to compete.
And one thing I wanted to know, because we've seen actions by Governor Ron DeSantis to try to tackle this, there have been other governors who've tried to do it. Is it that these officials have no fear of prosecution? They have no fear of being held accountable because they're so protected by the unions? Or is it that they're willing to take on that fear in pursuit of like their idealistic view of the world?
A lot of it is they're not fearful of any repercussions and they're protected by unions. But even in states like Texas, where there really aren't teachers' unions, these folks were more than happy to break the law. And I think to a large degree, some of the politicians are to blame because they passed these bills. We banned CRT in our state. And they pat themselves in the back and they go home and they go back to their districts and they claim they solved the problem. Well, they don't want to then admit that their solution didn't do a gosh darn thing. They instead want to say, well, we're going to get to the bottom of it. It doesn't matter. These administrators are going to stay one step ahead of them. Just because you've identified a problem doesn't mean that politicians are well equipped to solve it. The solution is to get government out of the way. The solution is to treat public education the way we treat the way we treat food stamps. You know, if you get a food stamp, you're not assigned based on your home zip code a grocery store that you have to go shopping at. You know, imagine how bad that would be. You would be like, well, they don't sell the food I like there. The owner's a jerk. Well, tough luck. You know, that's your grocery store based on your zip code. That's how we treat public education. Why? Instead, the money should follow the child so that parents can choose what they want to choose. Maybe you want to send your kid to a school that prioritizes diversity, equity, and inclusion over arithmetic. Fine, that's your business. But parents who don't want that for their child shouldn't be forced into this one-size-fits-all solution.
And schools know very well that there is a push for school choice because of this. They know that that's happening. Have you seen any reporting of schools trying to circumvent the school choice movement, trying to push against it in the classroom or out of the classroom?
Well, of course. I mean, they endlessly spread lies and claim that it's going to defund public education when, in fact, backpack bills increase per pupil funding for traditional public education. They, complain about charter schools and say we should only support public schools, when in fact charter schools are public schools. They bemoaned that, well, if somebody had a voucher, they might spend it at a private school. But no one complains about a food stamp being spent at a private grocery store. It's the same thing. And then they, of course, lie about how well these kids are performing in schools and talk about graduation rates. But then if you look at it, They're passing kids on to the next grade every year, even when they can't pass any standardized test scores. Even if they can't read, these kids get promoted anyway. Public education in America is an embarrassment.
So in your view, these actions by senators, state senators, these actions by governors, they're not really amounting to tangible change in the classroom?
No, not at all. And in fact, what's really dangerous about them is it allows parents to think they have a false sense of security. Similarly, when parents take over their school boards, they're thrilled. We solved the problem. We got rid of the radicals. Public education's fixed. Call it a day. But when I've met with countless administrators who would laughingly tell me how they break the law, state law, you think they care who your school board is? They probably don't even know who the school board is. These are folks who are more than happy to break the law. They don't care who won the most recent school board election. These folks think they're doing God's work if they believe in God, and they're not going to let some school board member stand in their way.
And that's an important point, because a lot of parents in this country have thought we've taken the school boards, so now everything is safe. Accuracy in media has been around for decades. Why this focus on education right now? Why this prioritization of it?
Well, we've really gotten back to our roots of investigative journalism for our organization. We spent decades not only doing investigative journalism before I was even born, before James O'Keefe was born, but also back then exposing how biased the mainstream media was. And when our founder, Reed Irvine, passed away, the New York Times and others credited or blamed him with causing a distrust of the mainstream media. Well, now that the media have entirely abdicated their role as decent journalists, now that the Washington Post and CNN basically write clickbait stories telling their audiences what they want to hear, we feel it's incumbent upon us to take their place and provide real, honest, investigative journalism. And this is one of the most important topics. It's one of the greatest mistruths, the greatest lies in our society, what's happening in public education, and Americans deserve to know what's happening with their money.
And would you say there needs to be more of a focus on covering red states, covering red districts, rather than just going right to Berkeley or to areas that we know are hard left-wingers? Because in these red districts, in these red states, you have voters who care and can take action at the ballot box. So does there need to be a bigger focus overall on exposing things in those areas in this country?
Well, I think it's always important to make sure that your actions can have an actual consequence rather than just making you feel like you did something good. I feel like if we expose the things that we've been exposing in Illinois or in California or in New York, rather than getting fired, rather than laws being changed, the people we expose would probably get a fan club and a bonus, maybe a promotion of the corner office. I want to do it in places where it can actually have a meaningful impact. And again, I want to do it in places where people don't expect it.
And has that been the response you've gotten? People are surprised that they've been exposed, because we've seen other investigative journalism and it's become a thing where left-wingers are not shocked that they've been exposed anymore. But in the areas you've been covering geographically, are those people surprised? Has there been that pushback?
Oh my gosh. I mean, you look at what we've seen in Ohio recently. They have packed school board emergency meetings with angry parent after angry parent after angry parent bemoaning what's happening with their school district. Mm-hmm. And they call us and they email us every day and they want to ask me what I should do. And it's like, I don't know what the heck you should do if you can't get your kid out of traditional public education. I'm not sure what to do. People reach out to us in New York and New Jersey and they know that it's happening there and they want to ask us what should be done about it. I don't know. Like I said, I think it's irredeemable, because when you've gone into district after district after district, in state after state, and these folks brag about lying to parents, I mean, it kind of crushes any optimism that you might have that we can fix this problem. When I meet with an equity officer in Columbus, Ohio, and the guy tells me, well, a concerned parent called because we had an Ibrahim X. Kendi book pictured on our website. I said, what did you do? And he said, well, I asked, is that your only problem? And the parent said, yes. And he said, no worries. I'll delete that picture from the website. And he told me I did. I deleted the picture from the website. Now, is that book still proudly in the library? Yes. But that parent's happy. I mean, when you hear stories like that, your heart aches for these parents that want to believe in public education. They want to believe in their parents' schools or in their child's schools, but they're lied to again and again and again. It's morally outrageous.
And for those young people who maybe aren't parents, who have just recently left the education system, people in their early 20s, How can they help in this effort to expose things? Because they don't have children yet, so they don't have that skin in the game, but they've recently been through it, so they know how bad it is. So in your mind, how can they assist the country in trying to break this bubble and expose what's going on?
I don't have children, and I jokingly tell people I've been to over 150 school districts, which is a lot considering I don't have a kid. But I don't think you need to have kids in each of those school districts to care about public education. And that's an argument the left often makes, that public education benefits more than your kid if it's in that school, if they're in that school. We benefit from having an educated society. Well, I've got skin in the game. I own property. I pay property taxes. I pay income taxes to the federal government, which goes to public education as well. I've got a heck of a lot of skin in the game. And I want to live in a society of educated children. I want to live in a society where children can get the education that their parents want for them. We all have skin in this game. This should matter to all of us. It's also important to remember that the biggest donors in American politics, it's not Charles Koch, it's not George Soros. The biggest donors in American politics are the teachers' unions. That means your tax dollars, which are the only funders of the teachers' unions, your tax dollars are being used against you day in, day out. That's wrong. Newt Gingrich, who I'm not always a fan of, brilliantly made the point that at this point, we have to accept that public education as we know it doesn't exist to educate the public. Every metric shows they don't do that very well. Right. Some kids get educated thanks to really well-intentioned teachers, but by and large, the kids don't. Well, what does public education do well? Without fail, every 2 weeks, the teachers get paid. Without fail, every paycheck, a portion is taken out and given to the union. And without fail, every 2 years, that money goes to big government left-wing candidates. Public education exists as we know it to fund left-wing candidates with our tax dollars. Do some kids get educated along the way? As I said, from well-intentioned teachers, yes, but that's merely a byproduct of a broken system.
So would you say that parents in general are underestimating the power of teacher unions, both in their political sphere and in their actions within classrooms? Because teacher unions know what's happening. They're sanctioning it, even if they're not saying it openly. That parents are underestimating the overall impact of teacher unions currently.
Unquestionably. And not only are they only sanctioning it, when we were in Utah, not exactly the heart of progressive thought and progressive ideas, we were in Utah, and school districts bragged to us about how they brought in the teachers union to teach social justice to kids. Wow. This is Utah. I mean, that's outrageous. They also told us how they bring in Planned Parenthood to educate children. In fact, there's a Planned Parenthood authored curriculum called Reducing the Risk that's pushed into classrooms all around the country as sex ed. Now, we can debate the best kind of sex ed program for your children, but if you look at Reducing the Risk, it teaches things that are in violation of state laws in many states. It even teaches things like teaching kids how to clear their browser history so parents can't see what they're searching. That's a problem. That's morally outrageous. And Planned Parenthood goes around the school districts and contacts the public health districts directly to partner directly with the schools to get this in your classes. So even if you control the school board, they may not even know that this is happening.
That is a problem, especially because it's alleviating trust between a parent and child. And I want to know, just sort of in closing, what can parents be looking for on a practical level within their children's curriculum, whether that's textbooks or worksheets? What are the buzzwords in that content that can let them know that maybe there's something that's not completely above board going on?
Yeah, if there's a diversity, equity, and inclusion team in your district, you might have a problem. If they start talking about privilege, or now as it's called circumstance, you might have a problem. If they start talking about belonging, social and emotional learning, you might have a problem. And it's really a shame for those who teach social and emotional learning, but don't do it in a way that advances the principles of critical race theory. Their thing has been hijacked. Similarly, as we saw in Florida, African-American history. I love African-American history. I love teaching about Frederick Douglass, but it's been hijacked by those who want to instead use it to push Marxism. That's unfair for those who actually want to teach African-American history. But unfortunately, these are the things we have to look out for now and investigate, because just as the environmentalism movement was hijacked by communists after the fall of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, for example, created the Green Cross, things like African-American studies, things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, are now being hijacked by radical leftists to push social justice.
And I think that that's an important point for parents to take away, that those buzzwords, that language is getting into kids' minds, and it's based off of historical efforts. This isn't a new effort. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people follow your work and the work of Accuracy in Media to stay up to date on your investigations?
Yeah, our website is aim.org, aim.org. We have all of our latest investigations on there. We're also active in every social media platform I know of. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, Instagram. We're even big on TikTok. Follow us on any social media platform, and the latest updates are on our website, aim.org.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing the work of your organization.
Thank you so very much for having me.